This is Talking Drupal, a weekly chat about web design and development from a group of guys with one thing in common. We love Drupal. This is episode 286, the Digital Project Manager. Welcome to Talking Drupal. Thank you for listening. And this week, we talk about the role of a digital project manager with Matt OBryant. I'm Stephen Cross. And as I just mentioned, Matt is our guest. Matt is the VP of Professional Services at Oomph. He has 10 years of Drupal experience and 15 years of DPM experience, which we're going to learn all about that today. Welcome, Matt.
Thanks for having me. Good to be here with you all today.
You know, I never heard of Oomph. Maybe you could tell us a little bit about that company.
Yeah, it's this like little unknown company in Providence, Rhode Island. We do work on some Drupal stuff, but yeah.
You guys have any job openings? It sounds interesting.
We do actually. You should go check it out at our website, John. You seem like you might be a good fit. I'm not sure.
Perfect.
And also joining us today is Shane Thomas. Shane is going to be our new guest host for the next 4 weeks. So Shane has been on the show before. He's an engineering manager at Gatsby. He's the creator of CodeKarate.com. He's an amateur guitarist and musician.
Very amateur, yes.
Very amateur. Well, look at the spread you have there. I see a Les Paul-ish thing on the right. What is that in the middle?
An SG.
Like
SG, yeah, look at that.
Yeah, no, I mean, I do play, a little, not live as much as I used to, but a little bit live here and there. But it's
awesome.
definitely a hobby. But yeah, good to be here. It's been a little while since I've been on the show.
Code Karate, and I think I mentioned this on earlier shows you've been on, was a super help to me, like in my early Drupal days. And I went and watched one of your videos like a week and a half ago. I was trying to do something in Drupal 7 on a site with I think it was views. What was I? Views bulk operations. Yeah. And I did a quick search and boom, there was your video right there again, man. You're still getting some activity on those views, on those videos, huh?
If it's Drupal 7, yeah. If you're still doing Drupal 7 stuff, it's useful. It's a little dated at this point, but I did put a lot of videos for Drupal 7 and some for Drupal 8 together back in, it's been a few years since I really was into it though.
Well, thanks for joining us. It's fun to have you here. And each week we also have Nick Laughlin from Enlightened Development. What's up with you, Nick?
Good morning, everybody. Glad to be here. Not too much new in the last week. I shaved. I was a little jealous of John's attention last week. Not really, but it was just time. Thought I'd clean up a little bit and go back to the summer look as well. Other than that, just been, trying out some new recipes and relaxing.
Great. John, what's new with you?
Not a whole heck of a lot. I was cruising Twitter the other day and saw a tweet from Matt Westgate. We had Matt on the show a couple of weeks ago talking about Tugboat, and turns out one of his teammates at Lullabot, a developer on Tugboat, has come down with the coronavirus, and it's actually in the ICU and doing a little bit better now, but wasn't doing so great. And his family started a GoFundMe to kind of help defray medical costs and things. And it really for whatever reason it really grabbed me. And I know there are thousands of people out there that are suffering, have suffered from coronavirus, and many people have lost loved ones. But it's kind of hit a little closer to home being in the Drupal community, and it was really inspiring to see the number of people in the role on GoFundMe who dropped a little bit of cash into that fund, and big names, small names in the Drupal community, people I didn't even know, and it just made me think that, I think we all need to be a little bit more aware of kind of our communities, whether it's the Drupal community or the Linux community or the Gatsby community or whatever community you're in, and what people are going through. Because I think people are going through a lot these days. So I thought I'd bring it up, and there's a link in the show notes. I'm not saying, hey, go donate, but what I am saying is, be aware of what's going on around you. And, if you think somebody needs some help and support, maybe if you have time and energy, maybe you should help and support them.
Yeah. As the states are opening and the US is opening, this still is affecting a lot of people in ways John just mentioned, and still just be careful. No matter what the government tells you to do or not do, just continue to be careful. So, Shane, as I introduced you, I forgot to ask you what's new with you this week.
Not too much.
Other than being on Talking Drupal,
yeah.
right?
Yeah. This is new enough for me. No, I mean, I would say doing a lot of stuff at Gatsby with e-commerce lately. So that's been a big focus for me. Just e-commerce, Shopify related as well, but just e-commerce in general.
Yeah. What's great about having a guest host on like Shane and like our last guest host,
Brian. His name was Brian.
Well, that's bad. Brian, it's great to get perspective. Brian was a front end guy, kind of a Gatsby guy, an all around Drupal guy. And then we get some perspective over the next month from Shane on different topics. So it'll be interesting to hear his point of view, even from today's show, of a digital project manager. So Matt, what is new with you this week that you'd like to share with our listeners?
Yeah, I mean, not a whole heck of a lot, but I did enjoy on Monday. I went to our office and I worked from the office, and that was the first time that I have worked from the office in a year. So it was really exciting to get up, have a routine, actually shower at a reasonable time in the morning and get dressed and drive somewhere and whatnot. So that was pretty cool. I mean, I was by myself and I was the only one there, and that was weird, but I thoroughly enjoyed actually going to an office and working from it for a day. So that was pretty cool. Felt like one of the more normal days from a working perspective that I've had in a long time.
How is Oomph handling the office situation? What's the plan moving forward? That's
a great question. We are actually, and have for a while, we allow people to go in if they want to, but there's a limit. So we have a sign-up sheet. We're only allowing 4 people in our office at once. So you have to sign up in advance to, so that you don't just show up and have to go back home or whatnot. But people need to stay distanced in the office, and with 4 people in a 4,000 plus square foot office, that's pretty easy. So and then basically once you're in the office, it's essentially restaurant rules, if you will. When you're at your desk working, you could take your mask off if you want, but once you get up and move around at any point, you still need to wear a mask.
Now I know you guys at the beginning of the virus were relocating. I can't remember. Did that happen?
It did. Yeah.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah. So yeah, we have this beautiful brand new space that like maybe one person a week goes to.
Yeah. Crazy, huh?
Yeah.
And for me, new this week, I'm just back. If you all remember, my daughter moved to Arizona, Phoenix last July. I moved her there. It was a great road trip, and it's the first time that I've seen her since that move. So she wasn't able to come home during the pandemic for any of the holidays. So it was a nice visit. I spent 4 days in Phoenix. My wife's going to spend the rest of the week there. So it was fun to do. One thing we did, we didn't do a lot of sightseeing or anything. We still being sort of safe and not going many places, but we did an outdoor desert tour on UTVs, which was just a blast. I've never done anything like that, but it was like 3 hours of just going crazy in the
super
desert.
Fun, right?
It was so much fun. I couldn't believe it.
Was it a Jeep or like a truck?
It was like an ATV with 4 wheels. So yeah,
Okay.
so it was really rough terrain. So these vehicles were pretty rugged, and it was really bouncy and rocky, and but it was like one of the funnest things. I kept saying, you got a mask on and you have all this gear on. I kept saying to my wife, I have a big smile on my face. You can't see it, but I have a huge smile on my face right now.
It is super fun.
It was so much fun.
A couple of years ago, we went to Arizona, and we took JJ, my older son, on a Jeep tour. Similarly, yeah, it was awesome. And we went through like Red Rocks, and it was wet and had been raining, so there were puddles. And fortunately, my shorts didn't make it through from the trip. They were permanently stained with red spots. But yeah, it's a good time.
How many seats were on? Was it a multi-seat?
Yeah, so vehicle? It was four. So you could either take an ATV or a UTV, and there were 4-seaters. They recommended if you have people on the ATVs, if you weren't experienced, that you probably should take a UTV, because we're going to go through some pretty. We went a couple of like mountain areas where the path was about as wide as the UTV was, and there was like 1,000-foot drop to the side of you.
That's awesome.
So, and there were rocks, and it was really, my wife was freaking out, but it was just such a blast. It was such a blast. And then like living in the East Coast and growing up here, I haven't like had much experience in that kind of environment, like mountains. Like when you think of the desert, I always thought of like just sand, right? But when you go to Phoenix, you actually see that there's like Phoenix is surrounded by these huge mountains, but the mountains don't have trees on them, right? They just have bushes and cacti everywhere. So it's just an interesting way to look at the environment that I had never experienced. It was just super fun.
And today's show brought to you by traveltophoenix.com.
Exactly. My daughter's going to be there for 4 more years at least. So I'll be back a few more times. So that's my first Phoenix update of many, maybe. So let's move on to the primary topic of the day. Digital project manager. Matt, what is that?
What is a digital? Okay. What is a digital project manager? It's a project manager who works on digital things. So it can be a whole bunch of stuff. You can work on, web builds. You could manage, app builds. You could manage digital campaigns. So you'll find a lot of like digital marketing PMs. So they do, email marketing campaigns, SEM, SEO, that type of stuff. So it's just, it's project managing with the digital bend to it, any sort of thing in that realm. Yeah.
What makes it special that you put a D in front of the PM for this?
Because it's digital. Yeah. I mean, no, seriously, I had a friend who was he was a project manager, and he oversaw like construction projects. So there's a lot of, there's PMs in a lot of different roles. So like, for example, there's organizations out there like you can go get a PMP, which is a special project management certificate that you can get. And they teach you about just like core project management principles, but it applies to anything really. It doesn't necessarily have to be digital. So when you put the D in front of it, it's all about the digital stuff. That it's somebody that manages web stuff, somebody that manages digital marketing stuff, SEM, SEO, PPC, all that good stuff.
So would if you're looking at a resume, would you be looking at someone that said they were a DPM versus a PM? Would that mean something in today's world?
It would for me anyway. I mean, it would be. And even beyond that, though, a lot of times in the past when I have advertised for positions and I advertise and say it's a digital project manager, I get a lot of, I manage marketing, campaign type of people. I get their resumes. And even then, that's not a good fit for what we do at Oomph. So, the D is still kind of broad, if you will, when it comes to project management.
So, I think we all understand the value a project manager brings to a project, right? Keeping things on track, keeping track of budget, keeping track of timeline. Specifically, what do you think a digital project manager brings to a project? What value do they bring?
That's an awesome question, John. And I think the answer is simply and shortly a ton of value. But I'll just to highlight a couple of areas. I think when you're a digital project manager, that signifies to me that you are versed in the digital or technologies that are being used by your teams. So while you may not be the expert on those things, your core area of expertise is the project management stuff. You are exposed to and have a very high amount of familiarity with the tools and the different things that your teams use on a day-to-day basis. And so as such, I think this allows for a lot of things. Number one, I think it increases empathy for you in working with your teams. Because if you're familiar with, like, let's use Drupal as an example, you know how to build a Drupal site, right? Maybe you can do some site building, a little HTML and CSS, right? When you understand how something is built, that increases empathy for the people who are doing the building on a day-to-day basis. Like the first time that I ever tried to get my local set up was so incredibly frustrating for me. Mm-hmm. And I had always heard my developers saying like, I'm having issues with my local environment. And I was like, why is this so difficult? The first time I tried to set it up, that gave me a lot of empathy. I understood why it's so difficult, why you have lots of issues. And it just, I don't know, I felt a lot better when I heard that from other people.
Clearly that was pre-Lando days.
Yeah, that was probably like I was using like MAMP or something like that, or, yeah, exactly. Although people have Lando issues too. So, I think that another thing that's kind of cool is I feel like it's empowering, right? So if you're pretty familiar with like the Drupal CMS in general, right? Particularly when you're fielding like support issues, I look at the PM now as kind of that first line of defense, right? Those issues come in, and rather than instantly just being a funnel through which they go over to a developer or support team member to handle those things, you're kind of like, I don't know, you're the goalie. You're like, no, I got this one. Like I can take this, or this is not a problem, or this is happening because this or that. You can train up some of your clients a little bit too. And then what you can do is you can just filter through the things that are actual issues and actual problems over to your development team, such that they're not wasting their time with stupid little things that you can handle yourself. And I think that the developers that you work with really tend to appreciate that a lot. They don't spend their time on like dumb little things, but they're working on like real, big and important problems.
Matt, yeah. I got a bunch of questions that have popping in my mind as you're talking. Okay. First one is related to what you just said. It sounds like your structure, when I say you, I mean maybe Oomp's structure of the DPM is like direct communication with the customer and maybe tier 1 support.
Yeah.
I hesitate saying that, right? But is that what it is?
I would say so. I think so. And I know that some organizations, there's different schools of philosophy on this. Some people believe that PMs aren't client-facing individuals, but I believe that they are and should be, because, they're the ones that are overseeing the budget and the timeline and the scope and managing people and trying to get everybody in the right place at the right time. So I really feel like they're the person that should be that conduit, who is speaking with the clients and kind of doing all the intake. And yeah, I would like them to be tier 1 support for sure.
So just to clarify here, you're not saying that on a project there's a digital project manager and then a quote unquote regular project manager, right? The digital project manager is the project manager.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. It's just a project manager who is very technically savvy and knows a lot about the tools that their team is working with.
And, you noted Stephen asked, and you also mentioned before, kind of being like tier 1 support. I would imagine it's pretty important for that digital project manager to also kind of know their limitations, right?
Yeah, they should, and so they should know their limitations. They should know what they can and can't do. They should know what they should and should not commit to, which sometimes they overcommit their teams to something because they think they know more than they actually do, which can lead to some problems from time to time, no doubt. But yeah, definitely know your limitations. Don't go screwing around with stuff that you shouldn't be messing around with, because you're just going to create more problems for your poor team at points, no doubt.
So you mentioned part of it is, being able to be that translation layer and support layer. And part of it's also just understanding kind of certain difficulties and having empathy for the developer side. What kind of technical skills do you think DPMs absolutely have to have? And if somebody's looking to become a digital project manager, where should they start?
Awesome question. So I think it depends on the technology that your team works with. So we're on talking Drupal today, so let's talk about Drupal. So I think 100% that if you are a DPM and you're working on managing Drupal projects, you need to be familiar with, at a very base level, you need to be familiar with the admin, right? So you need to be able to know how to add content, how to edit content, how to edit maybe some content in a custom block or something like that. I think too, you need to be familiar with the terminology, right? So I love when I'm interviewing a project manager and they're like, oh yeah, no, like I've managed lots of Drupal projects. I'm familiar with all the plugins. And I'm like, no,
red flags.
You've managed WordPress projects, haven't you? Right. So know the terminology, know what a content type is, know what a taxonomy is, know what a block is, know some of the basic modules that we use, all the time on most of our projects, what they are, what they can do, what they contribute to the project. I think I would say those are very core. To get to know those things, I always tell people, build a website. Like, it's not that hard. If you want, download Acquia Dev Desktop and then spin up, a Drupal environment and just start messing around. Start building something on your own so that you can learn how these things work and how they all kind of connect and fit together.
Matt, are you aware of any trainings or such that you would recommend for someone to get to that level that you're talking about? Like, how would you recommend someone who's maybe they're a PM and they're they want to get a job at an agency that's doing Drupal and they want to get to that level that you're talking about? How would you recommend someone doing that? How could they get there?
That's a great question. So there are different lynda.com type courses that you can take, those types of things, LinkedIn trainings, listen to podcasts like Talking Drupal. Drupalize Me, I think, is a fantastic resource for people to get to learn the basics. I have actually assigned as a quarterly goal or something like that, a number of my project managers to cover certain topics in Drupalize Me to get up to speed. Yeah.
Very cool. And what kind of person do you think makes a good fit for a digital project manager versus maybe just a generalized project manager?
That's it. I don't know that there's any personality traits that would fit one over the other than someone who enjoys technology and is, tech savvy and familiar with technology. I think you should kind of be a technophile. I went to this course a couple of years ago, and it was just it was focused on project management and account management. And it was with a gentleman who has done these types of courses and worked with agencies for a couple of decades. And he said something interesting about project managers in the digital space. He said a lot of DPMs are actually former school teachers, because one, they're really good at taking a chaotic environment and adding some structure to it. Two, they're very good at taking complex things and making them simple for people to understand. And three, they're just kind of really good at like herding a bunch of like, herding cats, if you will. We've heard that phrase before, right? Like they're really good at wrangling a lot of energetic people and kind of putting them in, in order.
You're saying that developers are basically
that's what I'm saying.
That need a teacher to.
Correct. Yeah, exactly. Sometimes you need to get put in a timeout. Yeah.
Yeah. So Matt, I was curious, what's the workload look like? How many projects does a DPM typically manage? And I'm sure it varies based on the scale and size of projects, but do you have some general rules of thumb for that?
Yeah, no, that's a nice question too. It really does. It depends. I try not to give people too much stuff. Usually it's a few big projects kind of accompanied by a few smaller things. At Oomph, we have a lot of clients that are retainer clients that we continue to work with over time. So usually a PM will have 1 to 2 fairly big projects going on at one time, and then a handful of those smaller retainer clients that they're managing. But a good rule of thumb is that on a project, if you're estimating it based off of the level of effort, number of hours, whatever, that 15% of that should be 15 to 20% should be for PMs. So essentially, if you look at a project manager having whatever, let's say you want them to have 30 billable a week, that's 120 in a month. So then you can kind of net that out and say, well, their team should be able to do somewhere on the magnitude of what, I don't know, my math isn't very good, but 1,000 hours worth of work a month. So you could actually break it down numbers wise like that to figure out how busy they should be. Based on the percentage of time being spent by a PM against the given budgets.
So you're saying a PM can manage about 5 to 6 developers then, give or take?
They should be able to, I would think, yeah.
On a given project, if it's about 15%. Interesting.
You brought up a kind of a unique point. This wasn't exactly, it's kind of a little bit of a tangent, but I'm curious how you talked a little bit about estimating level of effort, hours. Does a project manager at Oomph, are project managers involved in the estimating process? How does that work between the relationship between the project manager and the developers when you're estimating, time or level of effort when you talk to clients?
It's a collaborative thing. So the PMs and their teams should be working together to figure out what the level of effort is going to be. So typically there's a couple of different points. So there's the upfront sales part where we're kind of figuring out what the budget is, right? And typically we don't get too granular on that, but again, the sales team, people like John, will loop in maybe like if we identify a certain group's going to work on a project, they'll loop in like the lead developer or something like that and try to come up with a budget. And then it's the PM's job to work with their team to manage that budget throughout the life of the project. But the PM is working with the developer on a task by task basis to figure out what it should be, what the LOE is on that.
Yeah, it's interesting to me because I was previously at an agency before, and estimates are much more based on time, which they should be because time is billed to clients. And moving to a more product focused company, it's all story points, and it's not always, estimates are not always tied to time. So interesting just to hear kind of the agency perspective a little bit, since I've been in the product end of it for a little while now.
Yeah, we're a time and materials shop. The story points thing is interesting because I know you're on the product side. Some agencies do use story points, but story points still net out to time in the long run.
Yeah.
So yeah, it is what it is.
Yeah. I'm curious if someone, as that was more of a developer, could move from a development type role into a project manager role, or do you typically not see that?
I have seen it, but I don't typically see that. And I think the reason that I don't see that a lot, maybe, I don't know, is once a developer, always a developer, I feel like. So they have a hard time delegating the actual architecture, development tasks out to their team, may tend to get a little bit too involved in the actual building of the product or project, and thus, might kind of get a little bit sidetracked from their core responsibility, which is, making sure that they're doing capacity planning, budgeting, timeline planning, all that stuff.
It's not the same thing, but you just accurately described my dilemma of moving from a developer to an engineering manager. So you nailed it. It's the same thing.
I'm not saying you can't be successful at it.
No, it is. It's a challenge every day. So because once you know the architecture, you want to be involved in those decisions. And I could see that being a challenge for someone for sure.
Yeah.
Matt, just out of curiosity, would that be in a hiring process, would that be a red flag for you or an area of concern if you were interviewing somebody who had previously been, on the development side of things and they had maybe very little or maybe no project management experience?
Yeah, I think maybe it would be, John. I'm not saying I would rule them out entirely, but yeah, sure. I might be a little bit curious about that and why they wanted to make the change from one career to the next, or was that just I don't know, they're just looking for a job, if you will, right. Are they truly passionate about moving over into the PMing space, or why are they trying to apply for this position?
Right. I think what might happen sometimes in a corporate environment, if you're moving up a chain and trying to make more money, that you could see yourself as a developer moving up to a PM position.
Interesting.
In the same company, right? To try to maybe grow your career or increase your salary. I don't know if that's true, but I could see that happening.
I don't know, but what certain companies do, but I don't see project management as, at least I haven't seen it as a career path for developers in terms of, particularly from the salary perspective. I'm not saying that project managers don't get.
So what are your thoughts about a career path from a developer to a sales position?
Wait a second.
Well, I think you have another expert on.
Okay,
yeah.
Moving right along.
Yeah. You mentioned that we talked a little bit about it's good to be well-versed in the technology, but have you seen successful product or DPMs move from maybe not outside Drupal to inside Drupal or a different technology that Oomph might use?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think, again, if you have that technology bend to you like tech, you get it. It's not all that hard, in my opinion, to kind of come up to speed on the other different types of technologies. I mean, at Oomph right now, so yeah, we work on a lot of Drupal projects, but we're starting to kind of, expand out into different types of technology, headless CMSs and those sorts of things. And I think it's a very natural progression to move from one tech to the next.
As long as you can remap your brain from module to plugin and back again, you'll be okay.
Yeah, you should be okay. Yeah.
Well, speaking of headless, have you heard of this thing called Gatsby? I've heard it's kind of cool. No, I'm kidding.
No, I haven't. No.
What would you recommend though for a DPM that isn't as well versed in a piece of technology that they might be moving into, either at Oomph or moving into a different DPM position at a different agency?
No, again, do some reading, do some playing. One of the things that I like to say is annoy your engineers. So ask lots of questions. Like, don't be afraid, and obviously don't do it in front of clients and customers. But jot something down, and then after the fact, say, "Hey, Shane, I noticed you said X or Y. Can you tell me why you did that? Like, what was the thinking behind it?" And it's not that you're questioning the decisions or recommendations made by your engineers, but it's just because you want to understand and learn and grow. So, I mean, I do that all the time. I'd love to ask questions and learn more about other stuff.
So as the VP of professional services over at Oomph, I imagine you are the person hiring DPMs, right?
Currently, yep, I am.
So do you have advice for someone who's looking for a DPM position? on some tips, tricks, things they should do to prepare for an interview so they could get a job in the DPM space?
Yeah, I mean, I think we have a pretty unique hiring process. And I think my interview process is kind of unique and fun. So I would say, number one, be honest and say what you know and say what you don't know. Don't be afraid to say, I don't know that, but I've done something similar. Or don't be afraid to say that, yeah, I haven't worked with that yet, but I would love to. Tell me, and then like flip it around. Like, where would you suggest I go to learn more about that particular piece of technology? How could I be successful at it? Like, I don't like when people try to pretend that they know something that they don't. For people trying to hire, there's obviously, you can look at someone's resume, you can ask them lots of questions. One of the things that I do is I put people through role-playing exercises during the hiring process. So basically, I will print out a random scenario. Usually it's some sort of like, you have to deliver really bad news to the client thing, and say, here, read this, ask me as many questions as you can to make sure that you fully understand the circumstance. When you don't ask me any questions, that's not a good sign to me, because you should always have questions. I'm purposely not giving you all of the information. And then what I do is I make you pretend that you're the DPM, and you have to call me as the client and deliver this bad news to me. And I like to see how you do it. To me, being a project manager, like, the most successful ones are very quickly and easily able to think on their feet and pivot and, navigate through difficult circumstances. And so to me, this is a great way to see how you think on your feet and how you're able to adapt to kind of different and difficult circumstances. Because frankly, 99 times out of 100, you don't get a sheet of paper that says, this is the problem, and you get to prepare for it before you talk to the client. It just happens. So how are you able to react?
Yeah, my favorite role play is the client has given you their goldfish to take care of for the weekend, and you accidentally killed it. How do you deliver that news? I'm kidding. That is not one of the role plays.
You buy a new goldfish and pretend it was the one that you were given to take care of.
Oh, no.
Simple.
Jeez. Okay. So turning the table on that scenario, right? We had some tips for people who are trying to interview for a DPM job. Coming from the company standpoint, what should companies be looking for in a good DPM?
I mean, I think it depends on what you're hiring for. I think there's the skill thing, right? There's definitely the skill piece. I think another thing that's important is the fit, the culture fit, because of the way that we work at Oomph. Mm-hmm. So the way that we work at Oomph is a little different than some agencies. Oftentimes at agencies, a PM is working with different project teams for different projects. That's not the case. We have dedicated squads, cross-functional teams. They work together all the time. So you get hired to be the PM on a squad. You're working with those people day in and day out. So culture is really, really important. And one of the things and tools that we use to help ensure that there's a good culture fit is we use the predictive index, which is kind of one of those personality profile tools. And I think it's really helpful in making sure that like the people are going to work well together. One of the other things that we do as part of that is we create something called a pro. And a pro is essentially it's the ideal personality traits that a project manager would have to work at Oomph. And then we see, based off of when you take that quick assessment, how do you match up with our ideal candidate, if you will? Are you a good fit for Oomph? Do you have the traits that we're looking for in a PM? So that way we can see like, what are your personality traits? Do you have the skills? And also, would you be a good culture fit?
So do the squads take part in interviews for their project manager then?
They do now. Yeah, they have the last couple hires.
Yeah, that's something I did want to clear up. Stephen made it sound like Matt was the only person interviewing DPMs. At Oomph, we have a pretty rigorous interview process where you meet with your squad, you meet with Matt, you meet with some other members of our leadership team. So by the end of the process, we have a pretty good idea if you're going to be a culture fit and if you're going to be capable of the position.
So before I get to my next question, one of the things that's kind of been in the back of my mind is DPM like a new term that you've started using, or is it something kind of out there in the world?
It's out there in the world, but it is, I would say fairly new, that I've only started hearing that within like the last, I don't know, 5 to 6 years. Yeah. I like, even when I got hired at Oomph, as a project manager, I was just a project manager. I was not a DPM. And then we started hearing about like these communities that were popping up. There's like, they have the DPM Summit every year, which is an annual event put on by the Bureau of Digital. There's a community called the digitalprojectmanager.com, which I recently got invited to be one of their official DPM experts, which is pretty cool. So I get to like mentor people and answer questions in their forum for people, write content and produce content for their site. So yeah, it's fairly new, Nick, and but it's starting to build up a lot of momentum, and people are referring to it more and more. Yeah.
Okay. So speaking of communities, can you tell us a little bit about the Boston-based digital project manager meetup that you're running?
Yeah, it's a really cool community. We meet once a month on the second Tuesday of every month, 6:30. Right now, we're doing it virtually. So this community, I guess, was around before, but it was pretty dormant for a long time. So I actually took over as the organizer of the meetup last January, and we got to have 2 whole meetups in person before COVID, and then we had to switch to doing it virtually. But it's been really successful. I mean, and one of the things that I like about it is you would think, well, we're only talking about like timelines and budgets and how do you make a good Gantt chart, but it's that's not it at all. We're talking about digital stuff. So we've had things about, good handoff from sales. That was a pretty decent presentation. We had somebody come and talk to us about dashboards, analytics dashboards, and how to use like Google Data Studio to build really cool KPI dashboards for your clients. We had our last talk was on the basics of SEO and what you need to know. So we cover kind of we had something on accessibility. We cover all the topics that are digitally related and tangentially related to what we do as PMs day to day.
Very cool.
Yeah.
So can you talk a little bit about your personal journey from, a doer to being a DPM to then being a VP?
Absolutely. Yeah. So I actually started off more on the tech side of things a long time ago. So I worked my first real tech job was just like a desktop support technician, and I worked at Filene's at their headquarters in Boston. Yeah, and so it was right in downtown Crossing. So
does Filene's exist anymore?
No. They got bought out by Macy's. Okay. So yeah. So I did that for a couple of years, and then I ended up getting my MCSE, and then I started working for a mortgage company, and I was their network admin. So I managed all of like their Windows Server infrastructure, all of their networking equipment, stuff like that. And it was when I worked there that they started expanding and opening up different offices around the country, and we used an application at the time that was very client server based. And it made it difficult for us to aggregate our data across all the different sites. So they were like, hey, we're going to build our own web-based loan origination system. And since I was the person that supported the client server app that we used at the time, I kind of knew the ins and outs of how it functioned. So they put me on the project team. And eventually, over time, I became the product manager for that. And so once it was launched, I managed the rollout of new releases. and adding new features and things like that into it. And it was web-based. It was actually built in Java. It was hosted with a tool called BEA WebLogics. That was our server infrastructure. And that's how I started kind of just getting into like the web-based stuff. And then I tried to start my own company with a friend of mine, and we were doing open source, like CRM and open source, like CRM integrations for companies. But we got like 2 clients, and then I got engaged, and then my wife was like, get a real job because we need money. So then I went out, and that's when I got a project management job. So I worked at an agency for about 6.5 years. Believe it or not, my first Drupal project that I ever worked on was with Nick at that agency.
That's where we met.
Yeah, that's where we met. And yeah, go figure. And then about 7 years ago, I got a job at Oomph as a PM, and I just kind of slowly grown there to oversee all of our entire delivery team. So now, as VP of Professional Services, that encompasses not only the project management team, but the development team and the design team as well. So it's my job to make sure that those 3 teams all deliver and on our commitments to our clients and do so successfully.
Sorry, my mind is blown by the fact that you knew Nick before you worked at Oomph.
I did, yeah. We were working on a Drupal project. It was pretty cool, actually. It was for an event planning franchise company, and so they had all sorts of different franchises throughout the country, actually throughout the world. And what we wanted to do, we were trying to determine like how should we do this? Should it be like some sort of a multi-site thing? Like what do we do? And through a mutual acquaintance, Dennis, I believe, was the person that introduced you to Nathan. So. Yeah, and so we hired Nick to come in and consult and help us figure out like how we should set this thing up. And it was pretty cool the way that we built it. It was a giant multi-site, but we built a custom script basically that all you had to do is there's a form, and when we wanted to spin up a new site, you would just enter the information for the new franchise, hit go. It would make a clone essentially of like our template site and spin up that site for you, drop in all the basic information. And
that sounds like a Nick thing.
Yeah.
It was an Iger like
yeah.
implementation.
It's like Iger before Iger was a thing. All right. Wow. It's a small Drupal verse out there.
Wow. Nick, did you remember that you worked with Matt before he said that? Okay.
Yeah, I worked with Matt and oh my goodness,
Mark.
what's his name? Mark.
Yeah.
Matt and Mark, they worked at the same company.
Okay.
I think Mark was the one that did the implementation.
He did. Yeah, but you consulted on how to get it all set up.
And I helped the planning.
Yeah.
Yep.
So in closing, what kind of parting words or what advice would you give a DPM or somebody looking to make the leap into DPMing that's listening right now?
Go for it. Do it. But I would say this. I think what makes the job really cool is, yes, you have your core responsibility as being a project manager. Like there are core things that you need to do, but you get to learn about so many different things. Like you get to learn about development, both on the back end and the front end. You get to learn about design and UX. You get to learn about SEO and SEM and social media marketing and email marketing. Like there's this whole digital world, and all these things kind of touch the projects that you work on. And so you get to learn about all of this stuff. No, you're not necessarily the expert, but you still get to, there's this whole huge world out there for you. And what's great is all that stuff is always changing. So you're never going to feel stagnant. Like there's always something new for you to learn. And I think that's really, really cool.
You also get to learn about the client and the client's industry, right?
Yeah.
And then apply knowledge from your past to their industry to try to help them. So, you're not just, you're not just learning on the like agency side, you're learning on the client side too, right?
Yeah, for sure. And the other thing that I would say is always challenge yourself. So there's this really cool thing. If I take 2 seconds for you, it's there was this guy in the 70s. He was his name is Mihai Csikszentmihalyi, and he wrote this whole thing about what's called the flow state. And it's this idea of like constantly incrementally challenging yourself and trying new things, because it's going to keep you engaged and happy. And so I like to live by and encourage people to live by what's called the 4% rule. Whenever you're working on something, try to make it about 4% harder than the previous time you did it. Like, always challenge yourself, because if you do that, like, it's going to make things slightly harder, slightly uncomfortable, but it's going to allow you to constantly build up your skills, and it will allow you to just like get better and better. And the thing that was interesting about flow is they've done lots of studies that when people are in their flow state, they're their happiest. So always challenge yourself, always try to get better, because you're going to be more happy if you do it. So
great. Very interesting. For our listeners, if you have any questions or feedback on this show, you can reach out to us on Twitter at talkingdrupal.com. You can chat with us on the Talking Drupal channel on the Drupal Slack. And you can email us at show@talkingdrupal.com. You can always get show updates by signing up for a newsletter at talkingdrupal.com/newsletter.
Thank you, patrons, for supporting Talking Drupal. Your support's greatly appreciated. You can learn more about becoming a patron at talkingdrupal.com and click in the big button that says Become a Patron.
Matt, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me. It was awesome.
Hey, before we leave, did we miss anything? Any points you wanted to make that we didn't cover?
Oh gosh, you guys asked a lot of really good questions. I don't know. I mean, I think I'll leave with this one last thing. Is basically like, you know, I think PMs, digital PMs, they give so much value. They contribute so much value to things, right? You know, like I think that it's a position, it's a skill, it's a thing that clients often are like, why do I have to pay for this? But like, I think if you really show yourself to contribute a lot of value to the project, like I said, some of the things I talked about, other than just the timeline, the budget and all that stuff, like when you learn about Drupal, when you get more technologically savvy, when you can talk about this stuff, it just puts you in a better position to not only help people understand the value that you bring, but it really communicates the value of the work your entire team is doing. And clients will see that, they'll feel it, they'll appreciate it, and they'll want to pay for what you're doing. So never underestimate your value as a project manager. I think that's the one parting thing that I would say. You bring so much to the table, but it's up to you to make your clients see that.
I think that was a great way to sum up the whole podcast. Thank you. If anyone wanted to reach out to you to pick your brain a little bit more about DPMs, how would they do that?
You can reach out to me on Twitter, right? My handle is Matthew, MATTHEW _O'Bryant, OBRYANT. You can email me directly too. I don't mind. MOBryant, MOBRYANT @oomphinc.com. So those are a couple ways, or you can try to connect with me on LinkedIn too. I'd definitely love to make some new connections, and we can have a chat that way.
Fantastic. Shane, thank you for joining us for the first time here as a co-host. If anyone wanted to contact you, how would they do that?
Twitter would be great. smthomas3 on Twitter, or LinkedIn would also be great. To echo Matt's point, that'd be cool.
Great. John?
I'm John Picozzi. You can find me on all the major social networks at John Picozzi, also Drupal.org. And you can find out about Oomph and look at those job postings Matt was talking about at oomphinc.com.
And Nick?
You can find me pretty much everywhere at Nixvan, NICXVAN.
And I'm Stephen Cross, stephencross.com.
If you've enjoyed listening, we've enjoyed talking.